Hello everyone, Game Master Matt here, and welcome back to the channel. Before I get into today's topic, I want to thank everybody that's been viewing and liking and commenting on the videos that have been coming out lately. I really appreciate it. Also, welcome to all the new subscribers. If you don't mind hitting that like button, it helps a ton. All right, enough of that. Let's talk about today's topic. And today's topic is about, well, settings, but more general. What should you pick? Should you go with one you created yourself, i.e. a homebrew setting, or something that's already been crafted for you by expert designers and writers, so a published setting? Now, this is a decision that a lot of GMs, whether new or veteran, have to face on a semi-regular basis, at least one time when they're going to start a new campaign. And in fact, I'm looking at it right now myself for Old School Essentials. And I will talk to you at the end of this video about my solution for what I'm going to do with Old School Essentials. But first, we need to talk about what kind of role-playing game systems you even need to talk about when it comes to a setting. Now, there are certain games that have an implied setting. That means the setting is directly tied to the game system. Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay. It's Warhammer Old World, that's what you're going to play. Or Soulbound, Age of Sigmar, RuneQuest, Symbaroum. Those are all games that are directly tied to a setting. So if you're going to play RuneQuest, odds are you're going to play in Glorantha. However, there are those where there is a little bit of a tie to a setting, and you could pretty easily pull it away from that setting and set it into your own world or into any other world. I'm thinking here of 13th Age or Pathfinder or even Forbidden Lands. You can take that core mechanic and plop it really into any world. And then, of course, there are those game systems that really don't have an implied setting. I'm thinking here of GURPS, Savage Worlds, and of course the big one, Dungeons and Dragons, and everything tied to Dungeons and Dragons, be that Old School Essentials, Castles and Crusades, Swords and Wizardry, old school editions of Dungeons and Dragons. They have settings, but none of them are tied specifically to the game. So it's really easy to take what you have in 5th edition D&D or 2nd edition or whatever edition or Old School Essentials and put it into any setting, whether your own homebrew creation or one that's been published for you. But this is really where it comes in. Where do you pick which direction to go? And I'm going to list some pros and cons of both going with a published setting and your own homebrew setting. But we're going to start off with published settings. And of course, we're going to start off with the pros. So the key thing here when it comes to a published setting, the big thing is all the work is done. Everything is already done for you. You don't have to think of NPC names, at least not the big ones, or maps, or names of places and locations. A lot of them come with monsters included. A ton of the work, most of the work has already been done as far as the world. So you don't have to worry about that. You don't have to spend time on that, which can be a huge bonus, especially for a newer dungeon master who's not quite that familiar yet with D&D, but wants to be a DM and so doesn't really want to invest the time yet, or feels a little overwhelmed investing the time in creating a world. This is one of the big things. The work has already been done for you. Next thing is it's all been play tested over and over and over again. All the plot holes, all the world issues, for the most part, have been tested, found out, and with additions probably already changed a little bit. You don't have to worry about that. It's imminently playable right away. There are also a lot of source materials in published settings. I mean, if we just look at this one here, this is, by the way, the best version of Forgotten Realms. This is the AD&D first edition. Second edition is still pretty good. Third edition, for me, that's where it kind of deviates a little bit. This is still fully Ed Greenwood's vision. And there's a ton of stuff available for Forgotten Realms, or one of my personal favorites over there, Dark Sun, Greyhawk, which is my absolute favorite setting to play D&D in. There are so many source materials when it comes to just deep dives into regions, NPCs, adventures, modules, and so on. It's all there, and you have huge resources you can pick from already. Next is in a published setting, for the most part, a lot of them are pretty known and familiar. So you already kind of know what you're getting into to a degree, if you've really ventured into D&D or anything at all in any form. And a lot of your players also find it known and familiar. So that means there's not a ton of work to get them to kind of imagine the world that they're stepping into, because a lot of times they already kind of know what Forgotten Realms or Greyhawk, maybe even Dark Sun are kind of like. But you can also just send them some basic information, and then it's quickly familiar for them. It is not an unknown. So that brings us to our first con in published settings, and it actually, kind of dovetails perfectly with the last pro, and that is known and familiar. So we've all had that player who is a hardcore stickler for the rules and lore of a setting. And maybe they know more about it than you do as the GM running it. I know I've run into that, and I'm sure plenty of you have as well. Yes, you are the GM. You make the world your own, everybody's Glorantha will vary, a very famous saying from RuneQuest. But still, there are people who just know a lot about the setting, and if you deviate a little bit, they're going to cringe and maybe cause issues at the table. So that's definitely a con to keep in mind. Next, we've got prep heavy. So a published setting is prep heavy. You have to do a lot of reading ahead of time. Now, I'm running a Castles and Crusades campaign in Greyhawk, and I'm constantly refreshing information for myself, reading up on decades of source materials to find maybe the 5 paragraphs that really mean something to what's going to happen here moving forward. So it's very, very prep heavy when it comes to that. The next negative, limited creativity. Not no creativity. You can still really make it your own, but a lot of that general creative work has already been done for you. So yeah, I mean, I mentioned it's a pro that the work has been done, but it is also a con that your creativity is a little bit more boxed in than it is if you create your own world. So that brings me to the first pro of your homebrew setting. It's 100% yours. Limitless creativity to do whatever you want. You own it completely from start to finish. It is your baby. It is your creation. That is awesome. It's something I absolutely love. I've created a lot of worlds over the decades of playing tabletop role-playing games, especially D&D. And that is, of course, the exercise that a lot of us really enjoy as a DM or GM, is to completely create your own environment from scratch. A homebrew world can also be a collaborative experience in creation. So I used this in a recent campaign, 5e campaign, that was running for 2 years that we ended. That, yeah, I had the frameworks of the world, I had a lot of the details written out, but not everything. And I let the players really create certain aspects of the world that is directly related to their characters. I didn't have all the details of One Dwarven Kingdom mapped out because we weren't really going to play there. Well, one of my players wanted to come from there, and so we collaboratively worked on a lot of the lore and some of the background for that section. And that's a really cool experience to build that together. It is unknown. Now, as known and familiar as a published setting is, this is totally unknown. So your players are going into it in a full exploration mode. They don't know what to expect. So that sense of wonder is always given in a homebrew setting because they don't really know what to expect. You may be messing with some tropes and they don't know it. So when you make that switch and that change, all of a sudden they're like, whoa, I didn't expect that to happen. And that's a really cool experience at the table that in a very well-known setting like Forgotten Realms or Greyhawk isn't always the case. Now, the next big one, and this is anybody who likes the lazy DM approach, there's last session prep when it's your own world. You don't have to know everything. You don't have to read up a bunch of lore. You can honestly make up a lot of stuff on the fly or just prep for what's immediately in the world that your players are going to deal with, maybe just in the next session or in the next 2 or 3 sessions. Just looking a little bit ahead, it helps. Then you have less work to do in the next few weeks. But your session prep overall is much lower because you don't have to deep dive, read a lot. You can just create it a little bit here and there and where you need it. That leads me to the first con in a homebrew setting. You have to do all the work. No one's done anything for you. Yeah, you can borrow things from other worlds, but it's really all on you. You have to do absolutely everything. You have to come up with the religion, the maps, the names, locations, all that stuff is 100% on you. That can be very daunting and overwhelming for a lot of GMs, especially newer ones. Well, this is a very obvious point now. It's untested. Obviously, no one's play tested this because you are play testing it while you're playing, and plot holes that you may not be aware of can be laid bare in a session. So you got to really think on the fly there. So it not being tested over years or by a crew of experienced designers can be a bit of a negative. Finally, and this is a con, but I also see it as a pro, and that's a setting guide. In a homebrew setting, I truly believe you need to give your players at least some basic information. Basic information on the world, where they're from, the playable ancestries, classes, religion, how that all works, how magic works. If you're just going with Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition and you want to have certain limitations that certain races aren't there or certain spells are different, you kind of have to let them know that ahead of session 0 and create a setting guide. Now, it could just be 2 or 3 pages, or it could be 20 to 30 pages, like I tend to lean into, expecting, well, I don't have any expectations that my players read it, but at least the guide is there for a quick reference for them. That is something I do recommend you create. And actually, thinking about it, if you're going to run a published setting, you may want to write one too, because you can't expect your players to read up on 30, 40, 50 years of Greyhawk history and lore, but maybe just give them a little bit of an abridged one. The nice thing is there, you can copy and paste if you have the PDFs. If you're not running a published setting, but you're homebrewed, there's no copy and pasting. You need to write all of that yourself. And to me, it's a must-have. I've played in games in a homebrew setting without a setting guide, and I felt like I was treading water the entire time as a player. It wasn't helpful in role playing, in thinking of a backstory, or even kind of understanding what this world is about. So I definitely recommend that. So there you have some pros and cons of both homebrew setting and published settings. Now, what should you do? Well, I can't answer that. That's up for you to decide. I'm going to tell you a little bit of what I'm going to do with Old School Essentials. Now, I've been kind of bouncing back and forth on whether or not I just play Old School Essentials in Mystara, because that was written for BX or BECME D&D, which is essentially Old School Essentials. And yeah, that's cool, but I do love to create my own stuff, but I don't have the time to create an entire universe. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a micro setting. So just a very small sliver of the world that is entirely my own. And then I'm going to add some stuff. I'm going to add this right here. This is In the Shadow of Tower Silver Axe by Jacob Fleming. This is for Old School Essentials, and it's another micro setting that you can just plop in. Dolmenwood, obviously created for OSE. This is Winter's Daughter. Plop that in there, and here you've got some OSE kind of modules. This is Halls of the Blood King, and we've got the Incandescent Grottos as an example. I've got Rackham Vale as well. And these will all be parts of the world that the players can travel towards, possibly if they leave the kind of micro setting that I'm creating. That is going to be a little bit bigger, but they could move to the east and there's Dolmenwood. They can move to the west and that somehow they get to Rackham Vale. So I'm kind of doing both. I am creating my own setting, but it's a small one. It's not a giant world. But the rest of the world I'm going to populate with stuff that's already been written. And yes, I'll probably take some stuff out of Mystara. The Grand Duchy of Karamekas is an example. Maybe plop in that, slightly changed, of course, because the history is going to be different. But that way I can build a world between published and my own stuff and throw in Keep on the Borderlands and other, adventures created for basic D&D, so I don't absolutely have to come up 100% with everything all the time, especially because I do like playing hex crawl sandbox style games, which OSE is great for. So that's my approach with Old School Essentials. If you want to find out more about, if you're interested in how I'm going to build this world and my little micro setting, let me know down in the comment section, and I'll maybe do some videos about that or put it over on my blog. The link to that you will find down in the description as well. So thank you again for watching the video. Please hit that like button. It means a lot to me and it really helps the channel grow. If you have any questions about anything I did here, comments down below, and I will talk to you soon. This is Game Master Matt, and take care.